statewide office. Governor Hunt is a native of Cullman County, Alabama, where he served as county probate judge for some 12 years. The governor has recently been under scrutiny for alleged misuse of inaugural funds. We take you now to Montgomery, Alabama for Governor Hunt's State of the State Address.
Governor, the proclamations are in envelopes.
Hello there. Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Lieutenant Governor Folsom, Speaker Clark, members of the court, legislators, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is fitting that we gather tonight in the historic Alabama Capitol. We celebrate the rebirth of a great tradition, the assembling of the Alabama legislature in the building that has come to symbolize Alabama itself. Here in this room, many of the laws that guide us today were debated and approved. This room is a symbol of a government that works, and so it is appropriate that we gather here tonight, for the first time in 7 years, to begin work again. We should recognize some of the people who made history of their own in this past year and brought national attention and great pride to Alabama. Who can ever forget the spectacle of the Alabama Crimson Tide in the Sugar Bowl on New Year's Day? Rising up, rising up to defeat the mighty defending national champions. Virtually no one except the faithful here in Alabama gave the Crimson Tide a chance. And I think I was the only one that predicted they would score 34 points. The conventional wisdom was that Miami was simply too strong and that the enemy would overpower us and send us home from New Orleans with our tails tucked between our legs. But the experts at conventional wisdom failed to see the unconventional strength and heart of this team. It's the same kind of thing we hear from the doomsayers all the time. Those are the folks who think our state can never rise up to defeat our problems. Those are the people who always rank Alabama last in everything and who ridicule us for daring even to suggest that we deserve to be in the same field with California and Florida and the other states with the big reputations. Well, folks, we know now what happened. Alabama's the new national champion of college football. The doomsayers were wrong, the good guys won. One of the heroes of that great win is here with us tonight. He is the man who made what will forever be known as the play, George Teague. George, step up and let us recognize you. Coach Gene Stallings wanted to be with us here tonight, but he couldn't because he's out recruiting. But University of Alabama Athletic Director Hootie Ingram is here tonight to represent the Division I national champions, and we have prepared for the team a special proclamation because the team personifies the winning spirit that is Alabama. And they also stand tall tonight as an example for those of us in the state government as we prepare to face down the enemies of progress in 1993. Hootie, would you please come forward so I can present you with a special proclamation and so we can congratulate the 1992 Crimson Tide team.
Governor, I wish you'd have told me the week before the game we were going to score 34 points at it. And I could have slept a little bit better. But on behalf of Coach Stallings, his staff, and our fine 1992 Crimson Tide football team, we certainly appreciate this certificate. We were proud to represent the University of Alabama, the state of Alabama. I think I've heard Coach Stallings say several times since the game, what's the ingredient of this team? And he said the ingredient of this team to play together is because they all love Alabama and wanted to play at the University of Alabama. We thank you, and also want to thank all the people in this room for what you do to give us a great university, give us a great state, and all you people got pretty good challenges too, and we respect that, and thank you for serving us. Thank you very much.
We're honored to have with us tonight the head coach of another national champion. The Jacksonville State University Gamecocks are the new champions of Division II, and they too proved the critics wrong. In the final 20 seconds of the championship game played in Florence, Alabama, the Jacksonville State linebacker slapped away a fourth down pass in the end zone to preserve a 17-13 victory and end Pittsburgh State's 25-game winning streak. It was Jacksonville State's third trip to the championship game in 4 years, and this time the Gamecocks won. And now Jacksonville State is the only school in the country that has won national championships in 3 major sports: football, basketball, and baseball. I want to congratulate Jacksonville State coach Bill Burgess and his team on an outstanding year. Coach Burgess came to be with us tonight, even though this is the night before National Signing Day, so he's made a big sacrifice to be with us. Coach Burgess, will you please come forward for a special award and to make a few comments? Coach.
Thank you, Brody.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say, second what Hootie said too, we respect you, we respect the job that you do. We also understand how hard it is. Believe me, we really understand that. And we're awful proud to be from the state of Alabama, and we're awful proud to represent Jacksonville State University. So what I'd like to tell you is this: on behalf of our president, Dr. Harold McGee, our athletic director, Mr. Jerry Cole, a great group of young men who play this game. They play hard every snap of every quarter. They want to be at Jacksonville State University. They ain't got their hands out. They enjoy playing the game, and what I consider the greatest group of assistant coaches I've ever had the privilege of working with. From all of us, we'd like to say thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Well, Alabama's successes last year did not begin and end on the football field. It was another victorious year for the economy of Alabama. And once again, the Chicken Little crowd was wrong. In spite of the national recession, Alabama's economy fared relatively well throughout the year. Consider this: Alabama led the Southeast in economic performance for the second quarter of 1992, according to Kemper Securities. During the same quarter, the Commerce Department ranked us 18th in the nation in personal income growth. And that's better than New York and California, and it is proof that those from inside and outside Alabama who criticize our state as some kind of haven for low-paying jobs are years and years behind the times. Maybe the best economic news came in October when the unemployment rate fell to 6.1%. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the furthest below the national average that Alabama's unemployment rate has ever been. And for the year, Alabama's jobless rate wound up under the national average for the first time in 14 years. In 1986, the year before I became governor, the United States was in the middle of the longest peacetime economic expansion in its history. Yet the average annual unemployment rate in our state was 9.8%. In 1991, as the United States as a whole struggled with a recession, the jobless rate in Alabama was down by more than a fourth. This means that there are more than 100,000 people, more people with jobs now than there were 6 years ago. That's like having a new county the size of Etowah County, where everyone has a job that was not there 6 years ago. And this just in also, home sales in Alabama, another barometer of the economy, were up 18% in 1992, and that is more than twice the national average. How about that? Who would ever have thought we would see the day that Alabama's economy would perform so much better than the nation's as a whole? And the jobs that were created here were better jobs. Back in 1986, the income earned in Alabama by each citizen averaged about $11,575. The latest figures available show that personal income in Alabama has jumped almost 40%. Alabama was in the top 20 in personal income growth the last year. All of us were worried about the effect the recession might have on Alabama's economy in 1992. The national recession made it difficult to repeat Alabama's past economic performances. But I have more good news for you. I can announce to you tonight that we have completed our industrial development survey for 1992, and once again, Alabama has set new records. For a record sixth consecutive year, Alabama recorded more than $2 billion last year in industrial development. And that includes almost 20,000 new industrial jobs announced last year. Compare that to the days before you and I worked to reform Alabama's economy. Prior to 1986, Alabama had never had more than 2 consecutive years with $2 billion in industrial development. Now we've topped $2 billion for 6 consecutive years, and that's progress. Another way to judge how much is being invested in Alabama is to look at the franchise tax paid by out-of-state corporations to do business here. Those taxes are a very rough indication of how much capital is employed in Alabama by those companies. In 1986, those taxes totaled $61 million. 6 years later, in 1992, the amount had soared by more than 70%. Kemper Securities reported that the improvement in Alabama's economy was the best in the Deep South in the third quarter of the year. In fact, we were doing far better than Georgia and Florida. So let the doomsayers chew on that for a while. They were wrong again. 1992 was another record year for Alabama. But just like on the football field, all the headlines kept going to the other guys while Alabama was quietly piling up victories. Seems to happen that way for good conservative football teams. Their achievements seem to go virtually unnoticed by the liberal news media, just as the progress of good conservative governments seem to be ignored by much of the media. I want to issue this challenge again tonight to the news media, and I want to do it right here on statewide television and radio so that tens of thousands of people all across Alabama who are watching and listening tonight can join in with me. And I know that many in the legislature share these feelings. There is a reason why the news media ranks so low in public opinion polls, lower even than politicians. And that reason is the media in general is too negative. People are sick and tired. People are sick and tired of seeing the front pages of the newspapers and hearing the beginning of the radio and television news broadcast dominated by gloom and doom reports. And yet when Alabama finally gets ranked #1 in something good, other than football, of course, you can usually only find the story in the newspaper right next to the ad that says, "I will not be responsible for any debts other than my own." I implore the media, do yourselves and all of Alabama a favor. Stop being so negative all the time. And stop granting sainthood to every ivory tower college professor who claims that Alabama is home to nothing but barefoot, ignorant, good old boys. There are many more good things about Alabama than there are bad things, and it is time that story was told. You know, it took big plays for the football teams to win the national championship. Derek Lassick had to rush for more than 100 yards, and who can ever forget George Teague running that receiver down from behind and stripping the football from him, and seeing the face of that fella who had it stripped. Saving a touchdown. And remember Antonio Langdon in the SEC championship game, returning the interception for a touchdown to win the game. And the pass that was batted away by the Jacksonville State defender, saving the championship. Championship teams have to make championship plays. So maybe the state of Alabama needs another big play to show the rest of the nation that we're here to win the championship. Well, I've got one for you tonight. I want to welcome to Alabama a major new investor. One of the most respected names in women's wear is Liz Claiborne. I know because my wife told me so. This company has been a remarkable success, rising to the Fortune 500 list of major companies in a relatively short time. Liz Claiborne always has conducted its manufacturing and distribution activities in the United States from the East Coast, New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Today, however, Liz Claiborne Incorporated and I have signed the remaining necessary documents for the company to open a major finishing and distribution facility, creating 400 jobs in Montgomery, Alabama. And as you know, the way you count jobs, that's at least 400 new jobs for Montgomery. I first met with Walter Krieger and Kenneth Jantz and others representing the company in the December of 1991 when they came here after a visit to North Carolina. Since then, through efforts of the Alabama Development Office, the Highway Department, the Department of Economic and Community Affairs, the Montgomery Chamber of Commerce, and local officials and others, this project is now a reality. We're privileged to have as our guest tonight Liz Claiborne, President, and Vice Chairman Harvey Falk, and Senior Vice President Kenneth Gantz. Mr. Falk and Mr. Gantz, would you please stand and let us all recognize you and thank you for your decision to come to Alabama. This announcement follows a long list of significant achievements that have kept Alabama's economy in gear while other sections of the country sputtered during the recession. The Federal Reserve Bank said Alabama weathered the recession better than most other states. For example, Alabama is the only state in the nation that increased its number of textile industry jobs last year. And I think clearly we're positioned for great times in 1993. Income is up, unemployment is down, and expectations for success are high. The Liz Claiborne announcement tonight is proof that our expectations are justified. But you know, this announcement didn't just happen by itself. It took years of planning and preparation by Liz Claiborne and a lot of groundwork by the state of Alabama's economic development team. It is a formula of hard work and innovation that we have followed many times. 6 years ago, we decided that Alabama had to change the way it recruited new industry and that we had to pay more attention to the needs of existing industries and small business that made up 80% of our job market. So we completely revamped the Alabama Development Office and the Department of Economic and Community Affairs to eliminate the duplication and to concentrate their efforts to create jobs. We had to wipe out whole divisions and start new ones, such as the Textile Apparel team and the Task Force on Biotechnology and the existing Business and Industry Division to help expand companies already in Alabama. In effect, we had to design a playbook to govern how we would advertise for, attract, and keep business and industry. The numbers speak for themselves. Alabama has recorded 6 straight years of more than $2 billion in industrial development. And in 1992, we learned that Alabama ranked first in the nation in industrial development for 3 years in a row based on our population. Just like the Crimson Tide and the Gamecocks, the state of Alabama won a national championship. We reached the goal we set for ourselves back in 1987 to lead the nation in economic opportunity. But now the challenge is to stay on top. I submit to you that the same game plan that got us here, hard work and dedication to the task, will keep us on top of the economic mountain and will move Alabama toward the top on other critically important issues. 1993 will not be an easy year for any of us, but you and I aren't paid to come here to Montgomery and fill easy jobs. We asked for the burden of leadership, and now the burden is squarely on our shoulders, and we cannot look around for someone else to carry it. It's ours. As usual, of primary concern to us this year will be the state's general fund and education budgets. Let's start with the good news first, the education budget. All those numbers I gave you earlier that pointed out the strength of Alabama's economy were not the result of hocus pocus. We anticipate solid growth in the economy again this year, and as a result, the Alabama Special Education Trust Fund should grow by almost $180 million this next fiscal year. Therefore, we will have $180 million more to spend on our schools without raising taxes, and that is a significant achievement for Alabama. We cannot have good schools without good teachers. That's about as elementary as spelling and arithmetic. And here's another elementary truth for you. We can't have enough good teachers without good pay. Alabama has taken too long to make progress toward the national average in teacher pay, just like we have taken too long to recognize that money isn't the answer to all our problems in the schools. But we're seeing progress in the fight to build a realistic school system around the needs of today. And we also need to see progress in getting teacher salaries up where they ought to be. So I will propose a 5.5% pay raise for school teachers beginning October 1st, and this pay raise will be for retired teachers as well. We cannot forget the physical needs of the schools either. I will propose a $5 million increase in the school maintenance budget. All told, the budget I will propose to you for grade schools and colleges and universities will be almost $2.9 billion. Now that's a budget we can be proud of. I will make this warning again, though, loudly and clearly. Since 1978, Alabama has more than tripled spending on education, far outstripping inflation. But despite that massive increase in spending, we have not seen much improvement in the performance of schools. Children aren't learning much better now than they did before we threw all that money at the schools. This much is clear. All the spending has not worked, and parents in Alabama are sick and tired of it. They want better schools for their children, not just more expensive ones. I am proud to throw my 100% support behind the A+ Citizens Coalition and its work to build grassroots support for fundamental education reform. A+ believes, as I do, that we cannot continue to try to reform the schools from the top down. They know that we cannot fight our way through an education bureaucracy that spends money like it's going out of style and sometimes smothers creativity at the local school level under mountains of red tape. I endorse A+ 14 principles on which the schools of the 21st century should be built. The principles call for more accountability for spending, higher standards, higher expectations, and no more endless spending on an inefficient bureaucracy. I was happy to have a chance to join A+ at a public hearing last month, and I look forward to working with that coalition when it offers its program in a future session of the legislature. Turning back to the budgets, the news in the general fund is not as good, but then again, that's no real surprise. As we have discussed many times in the last 6 years, and especially during our attempts to change the way government was funded last year, the growth revenues are used primarily for the education fund, and the the gross over-earmarking of state financial resources has left the general fund with very little hope of growth in the future. I will propose a general fund budget of almost $822 million, and it is on that budget that this administration is prepared to live. I think the people expect that of us. There's something else the people of Alabama want, and so does this governor. It's the same thing voters all across the country shouted in November loudly and clearly that they want. It is time to place reasonable limits on how long members of the Alabama legislature and the Alabama congressional delegation can serve. Let's don't fool ourselves. People are tired of a system that fosters the growth of professional politicians, especially in Washington, but also in Alabama. The people in their wisdom have limited the governor, the lieutenant governor, and other constitutional officers to 2 consecutive terms because they know a truth that we in government sometimes miss, that politicians can rapidly fall out of touch with the people they're supposed to represent. It happens in Washington, it happens in Montgomery. On November 3rd, only 43% of American voters voted for Bill Clinton for president, but there was one very clear mandate on November the 3rd. In 14 states, voters were asked to decide whether the terms of members of Congress should be limited. The Wall Street Journal said this vote on term limits was as close to a national referendum as the United States has ever seen. Guess what happened? Yep, voters in all 14 states approved term limits, and they did it with an average landslide of 66%. Incredibly, in those 14 states, term limits got 20 million votes. Bill Clinton got 14 million votes in those same states. Clearly, term limits is a demand of the people. With the November election results, 156 members of the U.S. House of Representatives and 30 senators are now under term limits, and by 1994, at least 8 other states will vote on the issue. Alabama should be one of those states. There are many fine members of the Alabama legislature who have given many years of their lives to public service, and I know that Alabama has a fine congressional delegation. But the framers of our constitutions, Alabama's and America's, surely did not anticipate members of the governing bodies serving 20, 30, even 40 years, leaving good people without a realistic opportunity to serve. I will also support in this session legislation calling for limits of 8 consecutive years or 2 terms of service for members of the legislature, and I believe we also need to look at reasonable term limits for those members of Congress. Let's give the people of Alabama a reason to believe we're sincere when we say we want better government. Ending our own monopoly on the government is a good way to do that. There will be a bill proposed by members of the legislature to limit terms to 8 years for these U.S. House members and 12 years for the U.S. Senate, and that bill also will have my support. Oh, and one small digression, while we're talking about the elections and the general subject of government reform, voters in 6 states approved spending cuts or limitations, and on the flip side, 12 states proposed tax increases or bond initiatives, and in 11 of those states, the tax increases and bond issues were rejected by the voters. Again, the message is pretty clear. People also want reasonable limits on campaign funding. It is ridiculous that Paul Hubbard and I had to spend more than $10 million beating each other up in 1990 just so one of us could get elected governor. $10 million would pay a lot of school teachers or hire a lot of child abuse caseworkers. And it especially gripes me that my own campaign was spending about $100,000 a week just on television advertising. Surely if the founders had known that candidates would spend piles of money on their television images to win these races, they would have limited campaign spending. The candidates need to leave the television acting to Hollywood. Spending limits and limits on the activities of political action committees and other important political reforms are being debated now by the legislature's own committee, and I look forward to a program in this session that we can all support. The third head of this friendly government reform monster is ethics reform. My own case, which has led to completely false charges and a malicious attack on me and my family, is evidence that something is terribly wrong with the code of ethics that governs the conduct of public officials. The ethics law needs to be stronger, but it also needs to be clearer, so that never again can it be applied unfairly for reasons of political or religious persecution. What is unethical for a Republican legislator ought to be just as unethical for a Democrat. And what is wrong for a Democrat governor to do ought to be just as wrong for a Republican governor. There can be no more selective prosecution. Let me assure you of this. I will be here throughout this legislative session. I'm governor today, and I will be governor 105 days from now when you complete your work for this session. I hope that in the interim you will have approved a stronger, clearer ethics law that will be proposed by our special ethics law task force that has been holding public hearings around the state. The task force is made up of such distinguished Alabamians as former Governor John Patterson, Jefferson County Judge Elise Barkley, and I know their report will be a fine one. This legislature also needs to take more strong action in this session to protect victims of crime. I want to praise the legislature's record of passing the tough anti-drug and crime laws that we have sought over the past 6 years. Alabama is now one of the toughest states in the nation for drug dealers to carry out their filthy business, and we make no apologies for the tough laws that you and I have enacted to stop them. This year I will ask the legislature to pass a new law that will increase the penalties for carjacking. You may recall the terrible incident in Shelby County several months ago when a drug enforcement agent was gunned down while he was waiting in his parked car outside a store. The shooter almost certainly did not know that the man was a drug agent. He just wanted the car. I will ask you to establish a penalty consistent with federal law concerning carjacking, and I noticed in returning to Alabama that there's a news story about another carjacking and the death of 2 young girls. And we need to take action as soon as possible to make quality and affordable health care available to more Alabamians. It is a shame that in 1993, 700,000 people in Alabama have no health insurance of any kind, and it's even more shocking the vast majority of those 700,000 people work for a living. They aren't people looking for an expensive handout. They're trying to make a living, but their productivity is threatened because they cannot afford health care for themselves, let alone their families. A group headed by the Commissioner of Medicaid and the state health officer and representatives of the private sector health care providers is expected to offer a report on ways we can make better use of existing programs such as Medicaid in order to make health care opportunities available to more Alabamians. And another essential element to a good quality of life in Alabama is water. It's one of our most basic resources. It's also one of our most ill cared for treasures. Alabama is the only state in the nation without a water management program. It's certainly time that we join the rest of the country. And I will propose to you legislation that will allow the state to establish a process to ensure that our short-term and long-term water resource needs will be met. Through the legislation, the state will establish an Office of Water Resources within the Alabama Department of Economic and Community Affairs and a Water Resources Commission to start a comprehensive water resource planning, coordination, development, and management program. This bill has the support of the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor, and I urge all of you to join with us to pass it. Senator Dial mentioned that today 30 of you in the Senate had signed as co-sponsors, and I want to express my appreciation to you. It is also as clear that this legislature must again deal with the issue of tort reform, and I will be supporting that movement in the coming months. I know that much of your time in this session will be consumed by necessary work on reapportionment and other priority items on your agenda. But there are enough hours in the legislative days allotted to you to bring about the important government reforms that the people of Alabama are demanding. The legislature has a chance to take important steps toward answering the concerns of people about the need for honest, efficient government. Let's not miss this chance by letting time slip away from us. The people of Alabama are champions. But like our great football teams, they need championship leaders to make it all the way to the top. Let us be those championship leaders and put our faith and trust in the strength and wisdom of God shared with our people to do the rest. Thank you, and may God richly bless us all in our work this year. Thank you.
Governor Guy Hunt is now serving in his second term and is the first Republican governor of Alabama in more than a century. Until his election in 1986, Governor Hunt had never held statewide office. Governor Guy Hunt is a native of Cullman County, Alabama, where he served as county probate judge for 12 years. You may comment on this State of the State speech by writing to Governor Guy Hunt at the State House in Montgomery, Alabama. The zip code is 36130. C-SPAN 2 and its companion network, C-SPAN, are the cable television industry's networks for public affairs programming. C-SPAN 2 is now in its 5th year providing coverage of the United States Senate and an inside look at the democratic process.